What follows is my personal experience and interpretation. Others' experiences may differ. What happens when you ask questions in OTO? What happens when you challenge the narrative, hold a boundary, or tell the truth? Not in theory, but in practice. I spent over a decade inside OTO. I served as a local body master, and I helped build what many consider to be an active and thriving lodge. I believed in the work, I served the system, and I tried to change it from the inside. This video isn't about rumors, it's not a hit piece, and it's not a rant. It's a clear, documented look at how information control operates inside of OTO. I'll be using Stephen Hassan's BITE model of high control groups, especially the I, information control. This describes how high control groups manage what you say, know, and even think. I'm going to show you 5 recurring patterns that I personally experienced and witnessed. Patterns that, in my opinion, appear to suppress dissent, reward conformity, and quietly punish anyone who speaks too clearly and asks the wrong questions. And I'll show how those patterns don't just harm individuals, they hollow out the soul of the entire community. Let's begin. Pattern 1. Restricted or unequal access to information. This is when information is compartmentalized and access is tightly controlled by those at the top. In high control groups, leaders or their close allies decide who needs to know and who doesn't. Imagine you file a complaint, serious misconduct. Maybe it's harassment, maybe it's a boundary violation, maybe it's something worse. You do everything you've been told. You document what happened. You submit the report. You follow the process. And then silence. No one updates you. No one tells you whether it's being taken seriously. Weeks or months pass. If you hear anything, it's not from the governing body you reported it to. It's from someone else, maybe a friend of a friend who happens to be close to a decision maker. Or imagine submitting a formal witness statement and the statement is just never passed on. It vanishes. The person responsible for passing it on just never gives it to a decision maker. Or imagine asking how to advance to invitational degrees and just being given deflecting or vague answers. It seems everything just depends on vibes or personal connections rather than real merit. In my time in OTO, I heard about or documented or witnessed many incidents that in my opinion fit these patterns. When you're kept out of the loop on your own complaint, on your own advancement, on your very standing, it creates a profound sense of disempowerment. You start to question your own perception of reality. You start to wonder, did I do something wrong? If you're not in the know, does that mean that you're not trusted, that you're not liked? Over time, you learn the unspoken rules. Don't ask questions. Don't expect clarity. Play the game or get shut out. This is what I refer to as OTO's mushroom culture. Members are kept in the dark and they're fed shit. In my opinion, this turns the organization into a shadow play. Information isn't shared to promote transparency or growth, but seemingly to consolidate power. Leaders appear to reward secrecy and punish transparency. Loyalty is seemingly rewarded not by ethics, but by how you play along. And in a system like that, truth isn't what's real. It's what you're allowed to know. Pattern 2. Encouraging gossip while discouraging direct communication. In healthy organizations, concerns are addressed directly with transparency, accountability, and care. But in high control environments, leaders often discourage open dialogue, while simultaneously enabling back-channel whispers, triangulation, and reputation damage behind the scenes. I once submitted a formal complaint to a governing body in an attempt to resolve a problem constructively. The content of that report was misunderstood by a person in leadership. Instead of clarifying, he told his spouse, who told 2 other people, who told 2 other people, until it finally reached somebody, not even in the order. That's how I found out that a false and damaging rumor was circulating, because a person not even in OTO repeated it back to me. The rumor started with a misread email, and it spread with shocking speed through upper leadership. When I confronted the people involved, I got a strange mix of reactions. One person claimed that rumor spreading was part of his job as a member of CABA. Others never took accountability at all. As far as I know, none of them were disciplined, and many of them received promotions. That experience shattered my trust in the system. For years, I used to feel frustration that victims would not testify in disciplinary cases. I thought they were giving up on the process. I thought they were the reason that we couldn't improve the system. Now, I get it. If you're listening and you were one of those people, please know I am sorry. I am so sorry. You were right. I would not, in good conscience, recommend any victim of serious harm to report it inside OTO. Not because the harm isn't real, because, at least in my experience, not enough people are trained, neutral, or trustworthy enough to hold those stories responsibly. In systems like this, the loudest voices aren't public, they're private. People might be told that they're supposed to resolve conflict through forthright dialogue. But why would they do that when the system they're in seemingly encourages gossip, triangulation, and just to protect the powerful? In systems like that, rumors become a form of currency. Silence becomes safety, and trust dies in the shadows. That's not spiritual maturity. In my opinion, that's institutional cowardice. And it's how control is maintained, not through clarity, but through confusion. Pattern 3, surveillance and monitoring. This is when members are watched by each other. It's when people feel pressured to report on one another. And it's when leadership creates a culture where watching and reporting are not just tolerated, but rewarded. When you first join OTO, it feels like you're making lots of friends. You connect on social media. You laugh, react at each other's posts. You share photos from rituals and events. You feel seen, included, part of something. But here's what no one tells you. If you're still active in OTO in 4 or 5 years, especially if you're being considered for an invitational degree or local body master, some of those same people you connected with may start watching you. Not with concern, but with calculation. I've seen it happen multiple times. Posts you made 5 weeks or 5 years ago get screen captured, sent to SGIGs, discussed in chapter meetings you weren't invited to, used to build a case that you're not harmonious, that you're unstable, that you're not ready for leadership. And sometimes the person sharing the screenshot, it's not even someone you remember friending. In OTO, people connect with you as peers, friends, fellow seekers. But in reality, that connection can then later be weaponized, used to exert power over you without your knowledge or consent. It's not just lack of transparency. In my view, it is active deception. And the truth is, many people who want to advance in OTO do this. In my opinion, because they know it works. The result of this is that you start to doubt your instincts. Every post, every comment, every moment of spiritual or emotional honesty starts to feel like a potential liability. You second guess your tone. You wonder who might be screenshotting. You begin to distrust everyone. You stop speaking freely because you learned the hard way. What you say can and will be used against you. And the ones doing it may be the same ones who used to call you a friend. A culture that encourages surveillance doesn't have to install cameras in your home. It just has to reward informants. When advancement is based more on obedience than authenticity, when keeping your head down is safer than speaking your truth, everyone starts curating. Not their best self, but their least risky self. Over time, what thrives isn't insight or growth. It's herd-like conformity. What dies is trust. And without trust, a spiritual community becomes something else entirely. Not a place of transformation, but a place of quiet performance and quiet fear. Pattern 4, thought-terminating cliches and reframing dissent. This is when real concerns, ethical, philosophical, or structural, are dismissed without engagement. Not because they lack merit, but because acknowledging them would threaten the illusion of harmony, infallibility, or spiritual superiority. So instead of listening, the system attacks the person raising the concern. I've raised thoughtful questions about OTO's policy around gender and clergy, only to be unfriended by my own bishop and told I was causing drama. I've heard people ask questions about the work of EIO 131, only to be told that he's a grifter. I tried to discuss Michael Efforts's book, Priestess, only to be told repeatedly about some obnoxious thing he did 15 years ago. These aren't reasoned arguments. They're knee-jerk disqualifications, thought-terminating cliches meant to shut down discussion. For a long time, I thought this was just intellectual laziness. It's not. They're just following the example seemingly set by top leadership. When I respectfully resigned from OTO after years of service and leadership, I was told by someone I trust that Sabazius, the National Grand Master, spent 40 minutes of a meeting attacking my character in front of Man of Earth delegates. He mocked my spiritual work. He called my business a scam. He said I was suffering from spiritual psychosis. I couldn't handle being in OTO. That's not laziness. In my opinion, that's calculated defamation. That's framing dissent as mental instability. And in my opinion, it's textbook high control group behavior. And many people below him just seem to mimic it. When your ideas are dismissed, not because they're wrong, but because you're too emotional, too negative, you won't embrace the ordeal of initiation, it hits something deeper than disagreement. It undermines your credibility. It pathologizes your intuition. It isolates you. You start to wonder, am I the problem? Am I imagining this? Over time, you may even begin to self-censor. Not because you really think you're wrong, but because you know your thoughts will be used against you. In a system like this, disagreement is branded as disloyalty. Critique becomes heresy, and questioning power becomes a sign of spiritual failure. These kinds of reflexive dismissals don't just protect people in leadership. They seem to train the entire community to just avoid uncomfortable truths. Over time, no one has to say, don't ask questions. People just fall in line. And that silence isn't peace. It's fear dressed up as unity. Pattern 5. Intimidation around speaking publicly. In high control environments, public expression isn't just discouraged, it's policed. Not always directly. Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes it's a concerned message. Sometimes it's ridicule behind closed doors. But the message is always the same. Be careful what you say. In 2019, EIO 131 wrote a post on the Facebook Thelema group questioning the relationship between OTO and the Boleskine Foundation. What he said was factual, the connection was public knowledge, but it didn't matter. He was immediately suspended. Then, the National Grand Master, Sabazius, told Joseph Thebus to remove EIO 131 as a moderator of the group. Again, this was not an OTO group, it was a private group created by two individuals. But the reach of OTO leadership extended anyway, into private digital spaces, into friendships, into any expression that didn't toe the line. I made a public post criticizing the overreach. Within hours, I received a telephone call from an upper degree member. He said I should be careful what I post, and he wouldn't want to see something bad happen to me. When I pushed back, he defended Sabazius' actions. He even floated the following hypothetical. If a journalist were publishing pieces critical of OTO, and an order member were their boss, shouldn't the order be able to pressure that member to get the journalist fired? I told him that sounded like Scientology. But when I got off the phone, I took down the post because he had scared me. When you speak up and the response is a threat or a mockery or a quiet word from someone with power, you learn something fast. You're not allowed to have your own voice. Not if it challenges authority, not if it makes people uncomfortable, not if it deviates from the unspoken script. Over time, you begin to question what is safe to say, what is safe to write, even what's safe to think. You might stay silent, not because you've really changed your mind, but because you know you're being watched. Intimidation doesn't only silence the person being targeted. It sends a message to everyone else. Don't follow their lead. When critique is punished, people learn to self-censor. When creativity is mocked, people learn to stay to the script. And when honest expression becomes dangerous, all that's left is theater, performed in fear. That's not a spiritual path. In my humble opinion, that's a fucking cult. And the more power depends upon silence, the more fragile that power becomes. These aren't isolated incidents, they're patterns. And once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. Information control doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like vague answers, like a disappearing email, like someone just expressing concern. But the effect is the same. People learn to stay quiet, stay small, stay in line. And in a system like that, it's not truth or excellence that rise to the surface. It's obedience. If you're watching this and you've experienced these things, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not unstable. And you're not wrong for wanting transparency, fairness, or respect. You deserve better. And so does any organization that claims to value spiritual growth. Thank you for listening, and thank you for having the courage to see things clearly.